gripped the yoke of her 737 with a familiar ease, guiding the massive aircraft through the late-morning Dallas skies. The sun glinted off the fuselage, and below, a patchwork of highways, neighborhoods, and sprawling green fields slid silently past. In the cabin, passengers napped or scrolled through their phones, completely unaware of the subtle ballet unfolding above them. Flight attendants moved with quiet efficiency, checking overhead bins and sipping their coffee between announcements. To the casual observer, it was another ordinary flight, routine, predictable, but for every second aloft carried a private thrill that she could never share. Flying had always been in her blood. From the first lesson in a small at age 16 to earning her commercial pilot's license after college, she had embraced every challenge with meticulous attention. She loved the precision, the control, and the absolute focus that flying demanded. Yet something about the commercial world, though respectable and rewarding, had always felt limited. There was no sudden rush of danger, no instant need for split-second decision-making beyond turbulence or minor technical glitches. There were rules, procedures, schedules, all necessary, but they left her heart craving a sharper edge. As she monitored the instruments, her mind wandered to the scanner she had stashed in her locker at home. It wasn't a normal habit for commercial pilots to tune into military frequencies, but had always been drawn to the sound of tactical chatter. She had first discovered it during a layover in Washington, D.C., when she had stumbled across an old aviation magazine article describing the secretive communication protocols of fighter pilots. Since then, she had experimented with shortwave radios and scanners, straining to catch glimpses of a world just out of reach. She switched on a small handheld scanner tucked into her bag. Static hissed at first, then cleared, revealing a crisp, assertive voice over the frequency. Falcon 3, adjust heading 270, enemy inbound, maintain formation. His heart raced. Her hands tightened on the yoke. The world outside the window, the familiar suburban grid, the gentle curve of the runway lines far below, suddenly felt small, almost insignificant compared to the high-speed cat-and-mouse maneuvers these pilots were describing. She imagined herself in one of those F-22s, twisting through the sky at impossible speeds, feeling the G-forces press her into the seat as her instincts took over. She shivered at the thought, not out of fear, but exhilaration. The scanner crackled again. "Ghost Rider, do you copy?" Froze, her pulse jumped. "Ghost Rider," she whispered under her breath, a smile creeping onto her face. She had never heard that call sign before, yet there was something magnetic about it, like a ghost streaking through the sky, untouchable and free. The voice faded as quickly as it had appeared, leaving only the faint hum of static. She felt a pang of longing, a mix of awe and desire. Her life had been full of achievements, her captain's wings, thousands of flight hours, but none of it had ever made her feel this alive. The rest of the flight passed in a haze of routine tasks punctuated by these secretive bursts of imagined adventure. Autopilot hummed quietly and allowed herself a moment to glance out the window, watching the patchwork of fields and highways stretch endlessly below. Her mind traced the contours of aerial maneuvers she had only ever seen in simulations or read about in technical manuals. She pictured herself banking sharply, pulling off a sudden evasive move, and the rush of adrenaline that must course through a fighter pilot's veins in those moments of controlled chaos. By the time the plane began its descent into Chicago, the scanner was silent, the voices gone. The passengers stirred, adjusting their belts, peering out at the approaching city skyline. Followed standard procedures, running checklists, speaking calmly over the intercom, guiding the plane down with her usual precision. But beneath the surface, something had shifted. A tiny spark had been lit, one that would grow into a fire that no commercial flight, no predictable schedule could ever satisfy. She parked at the gate, shutting down engines and running through post-flight checks. Flight attendants thanked her with smiles, passengers disembarked and lingered in her seat for a moment, listening to the distant chatter of ground crews. In the quiet hum of the cabin, her thoughts returned to the voice on the scanner and the call sign Ghost Rider. Who was this person? How did they move with such confidence, such instinctive precision? And most importantly, could someone like her, an ordinary commercial pilot, ever reach that level? The questions haunted her on the taxi ride back to the terminal. She thought about her life, the stability of her career, the comfort of routine, the steady rhythm of takeoffs and landings. And then she imagined the opposite, the freedom, the risk, the exhilaration of truly pushing herself to the limit. She imagined the cockpit of an F-22, the horizon spinning past at impossible speed, the world compressed into a blur of clouds and sunlight. She imagined herself not as a passenger of fate, but as its master. Later that evening, back in her small Chicago apartment, unpacked her bag and placed the scanner on her desk. She traced her fingers over the worn buttons, imagining the voices that might one day respond to her call. A part of her feared the unknown. She feared failure, the ridicule of seasoned pilots, the impossibility of stepping out of her ordinary life. But another part, stronger, wilder, thrived on the possibility. She closed her eyes and pictured the horizon stretching endlessly before her, a limitless canvas she could one day command. By midnight she had made a decision, though she did not yet speak it aloud. She would seek this world, even if it meant stepping into uncertainty, even if it meant leaving everything she knew behind. Somewhere out there, beyond the predictable skis she had always mastered, was a challenge waiting for her. And somewhere, perhaps, was the cockpit that would finally make her heart soar. Commercial pilot by day, dreamer and ghost rider by night, was ready. The ordinary skis were no longer enough. The extraordinary beckoned, woke to the low hum of her apartment heater, sunlight streaking across the blinds, and the faint scent of coffee lingering in the kitchen. She had barely slept, her mind buzzing with the memory of the scanner and the voice that had called out Ghost Rider. The ordinary life she had grown accustomed to, the predictable schedules, layovers in familiar hotels, routine takeoffs and landings, suddenly felt like a cage. Something was waiting for her out there, something thrilling, dangerous, and utterly alive. Her morning passed in a daze. She checked emails, responded to messages from colleagues, and went through routine flight preparations for her next domestic flight. Then, tucked among airline notices and layover confirmations, she found a crisp envelope bearing no airline markings. It was thick and firm, almost formal, with her name written in precise block letters. Curiosity piqued, she opened it. Inside was a letter on official Air Force stationery. The first line made her heart skip a beat. "Ms., your record as a commercial pilot has drawn our attention. We would like to invite you to participate in a top-secret program designed to evaluate civilian pilots for advanced flight simulations in military fighter operations." Reread it, then leaned back in her chair, the envelope trembling slightly in her hands. Her pulse quickened. Was this real? A prank? She scanned the rest of the letter, detailed instructions for contacting a recruiter, confidentiality warnings, and a note that acceptance would require a background check and a short interview. The tone was formal, precise, but there was no mistaking it. This was an opportunity that almost no civilian pilot ever received. Her mind raced. Commercial flights were predictable. They followed air traffic control, regulations, checklists, and procedures. She thrived in that environment, yes, but she had always hungered for something sharper, something that demanded every ounce of skill and instinct she could muster. And here it was, offered on a silver platter. By mid-afternoon, she had made her first calls. The recruiter's voice was calm but authoritative, guiding her through an initial screening. Questions came fast: flight hours, aircraft types, emergency scenarios, decision-making under pressure. Answered confidently, her commercial experience lending credibility, yet she felt the tiniest tremor of uncertainty. This was different. This was beyond charts, procedures, or autopilot. She could feel the edge of danger brushing against her thoughts. A week later, found herself at a nondescript facility just outside Chicago. The building's exterior was utilitarian, almost unremarkable, but inside, the walls hummed with high-tech machinery, flight simulators, and the faint aroma of aviation fuel. Uniformed personnel moved with precise purpose, checking logs and adjusting monitors. The atmosphere was tense, professional, and charged with a quiet electricity that immediately put on edge. She realized she was a stranger here, yet her heart leapt at the thought of finally stepping into a world she had only observed from afar. A senior officer approached her, crisp and commanding. "Ms., we've briefed you on the basic parameters. These simulations will test your reflexes, situational awareness, and tactical decision-making. You'll be flying alongside active F-22 pilots. They'll be watching closely. Most civilian pilots struggle. Few succeed. We believe you have the potential." Swallowed, her throat dry, she nodded, trying to mask the thrill that surged through her. This was it, the challenge she had longed for. Her airline career felt like a distant memory already, a warm-up act to the real show. The first session began with orientation. Was strapped into a cockpit simulator, surrounded by screens that projected three-dimensional landscapes of clouds, terrain, and other aircraft. The simulator mimicked F-22 performance perfectly. Extreme speed, rapid acceleration, G-forces, and complex control systems. She inhaled deeply, her hands hovering over the controls, recalling every flight hour she had accumulated in commercial aviation, every emergency procedure she had memorized, every split-second decision she had executed flawlessly in the past. The session started smoothly. She followed instructions, adjusted altitude, and maintained formation with virtual squadron members. But then the instructor initiated a simulated hostile interception. Enemy aircraft appeared on her radar, maneuvering aggressively. The other pilots responded instantly, banking and twisting with precision born of years of combat training. Hesitated for a fraction of a second, then something deep inside clicked. Instinct took over. She executed maneuvers that were unorthodox yet effective, weaving through the virtual sky with a combination of precision and daring that startled the instructors. Over the comms, one of the F-22 pilots laughed, incredulous. "Who's Ghost Rider?" The name was spontaneous, born of astonishment, and felt it stick like a second skin. Ghost Rider. The civilian who thought she could compete in their world, and yet, in that moment, she was proving she could. By the end of the day, was physically exhausted but mentally exhilarated. Her hands ached from gripping the controls, her back ached from the tension of fighting simulated G-forces. Yet she felt alive in a way that no commercial flight had ever given her. The officers debriefed her, praising her quick thinking and adaptability. "Most pilots can't handle this level of stress," one said quietly. "You might be the exception." That night, alone in her hotel room, replayed every maneuver in her mind. She remembered the rush of controlling an aircraft that moved faster than anything she had ever flown, the thrill of outmaneuvering enemy pilots in simulation, the small but unmistakable respect she had earned from experienced F-22 flyers. For the first time, she felt a strange shift in identity. Commercial pilot, that was her past. Ghost Rider, that could be her future. Yet fear lingered at the edges of her thoughts. Could she actually leave the predictable life she had built? Her salary, her apartment, the small routines that provided comfort. Could she risk it all for a path so uncertain, so dangerous? She closed her eyes and let the adrenaline fade, leaving only clarity. She wanted it, not just for the thrill, but because she knew she was capable of more. By morning, the decision was made. Picked up the phone, dialing the recruiter. "I'm ready," she said simply, her voice steady, betraying none of the storm of emotion inside. She would step into this world, whatever it demanded. She would see what it meant to fly beyond ordinary skis. And somewhere in the distant airspace of her imagination, the call sign Ghost Rider echoed, waiting for her to claim it. The simulator doors hissed closed behind, sealing her inside a cockpit that looked like the interior of a fighter jet but thrummed with the hum of electronics and air circulation. Outside, the virtual world stretched infinitely. Mountains, clouds, rivers, and distant enemy aircraft projected in 3 dimensions. The other F-22 pilots entered the adjoining simulators with quiet confidence, scanning her with subtle curiosity. She could feel their skepticism, a civilian claiming a spot in their world. The tension in the room was palpable. Strapped herself in, adjusting the seat and helmet with precise motion she had learned from the orientation. Her palms were steady despite the flutter in her chest. She had flown thousands of hours in commercial aircraft, but this was different. Here, mistakes would not just cost altitude, they would cost credibility. She ran through the pre-flight checklist, muscles memorizing movements as though they were second nature, heart syncing with the artificial thrum of the engines. The instructor's voice crackled through the intercom. "Ms., you'll be flying alongside active F-22 pilots. Follow formation protocols, respond to enemy maneuvers, and maintain situational awareness at all times. This simulation will test everything you know about flying, tenfold." The screens came alive. The virtual jets roared into motion. Simulator lifted off the ground with a subtle vibration, as if the room itself understood her presence. Outside, the digital sky was endless, shifting clouds and sun reflecting off virtual aircraft. The other pilots took formation instantly, their jets streaking past at speeds that made her stomach lurch. She swallowed hard, recalling the calm discipline that had guided her through countless commercial flights. This was the real test: speed, pressure, and unpredictability. The first engagement began without warning. Simulated enemy jets appeared on radar, darting aggressively toward the formation. One of the F-22 pilots barked commands, twisting and banking with astonishing precision. Hesitated, processing the data faster than she had anticipated. Commercial instincts told her to maintain altitude and follow formation, but another, deeper instinct urged her to act, to anticipate, to strike preemptively. She adjusted the throttle, banking sharply into a maneuver she had never attempted, weaving between her squadron and the approaching enemy. "Ghost Rider," a voice suddenly crackled over the comms, laughter and disbelief mixed together. Blood surged. She had been given a call sign spontaneously, and it stuck instantly. She ignored the warmth of surprise and focused on the task, tracking enemy movement, coordinating with her squadron, and executing precision maneuvers with split-second timing. The simulator responded as though alive. Each movement was a negotiation with physics, speed, and digital reality. Could feel the strain in her shoulders, the subtle tension in her neck, even the slight pulse of her own heartbeat mirroring the G-forces simulated around her. The other pilots watched, their skepticism slowly replaced by astonishment. A civilian, and yet here she was, maneuvering a fighter jet in ways that some of them could barely anticipate. Time became a blur. Enemy jets weaved in and out of clouds, diving, twisting, and accelerating with uncanny realism. Countered, dodged, and repositioned with instincts she hadn't realized she possessed. Each maneuver was a blend of learned skill and raw intuition, a combination that surprised even her. She could hear shouts and chatter over the comms, but everything narrowed to her cockpit, her jet, and the sky. Then came the pivotal moment. A digital adversary closed in from above, banking sharply for a simulated attack run. The F-22 pilots followed standard evasive procedures but anticipated a different trajectory. She rolled her jet, dived, and executed a complex loop that threw the enemy off balance. A squadron leader's voice cut through the comms, tinged with awe. That was unexpected. "Ghost Rider, you just outmaneuvered an expert simulation." Exhaled, adrenaline flooding through her. She had passed the first true test, not by following rules blindly, but by reading the environment, trusting instinct, and acting decisively. The other pilots nodded in grudging respect, the first seeds of camaraderie forming. They were competitors in skill, yet for this moment she had proven herself worthy. After the simulation, the debriefing was intense. Instructors replayed the session, highlighting unconventional but effective maneuvers. Most civilian pilots panic or, one said. Ms. displayed remarkable composure and intuition. You anticipated enemy movements, maintained situational awareness, and executed maneuvers beyond your training. This is rare. Listened quietly, absorbing the praise without ego. She knew this was just the beginning. The simulation had tested her reflexes and decision-making, but real airborne operations would demand even more: endurance, precision, and the ability to think in 3 dimensions while under extreme stress. Still, the taste of success was intoxicating. For the first time, she felt she was not merely observing the elite world of fighter pilots, she was stepping into it. That night, alone in her hotel room, replayed every detail of the simulation. She visualized the maneuvers, the enemy jets, the comms chatter, and her own split-second decisions. The name Ghost Rider echoed in her mind, both a challenge and a promise. Could she continue to rise, to become not just competent, but extraordinary? She felt the spark of ambition ignite. The ordinary skis she had once mastered seemed small now, confined. The edge, the thrill, the mastery of combat flight called to her like a siren. She opened her notebook and began sketching maneuvers, noting angles, altitudes, and timings. Each line, each calculation, reinforced her growing confidence. Commercial pilot training had given her discipline, procedural knowledge, and calm under pressure. Combat flight demanded intuition, risk assessment, and adaptability. She realized that together, these qualities could make her unstoppable. By the time she lay down to sleep, exhaustion mingled with exhilaration. Her dreams were filled with clouds, contrails, and the roar of engines at impossible speed. She saw herself weaving through virtual dogfights, each maneuver smoother than the last, earning the respect of pilots who had once doubted her. Ghost Rider was no longer a fleeting nickname. It was a mantle, a symbol of the bridge between ordinary skill and extraordinary mastery. Once an ordinary commercial pilot had taken her first true step into a world few civilians ever saw. The sky was no longer a boundary. It was a playground, a proving ground, a place where she would discover not only what she could do, but who she truly was. The morning sun had barely risen when stepped onto the tarmac, the air crisp and electric with anticipation. Before her, F-22s gleamed under the pale light, sleek and predatory. The roar of jet engines shook the ground as pilots moved with precise, almost robotic efficiency. Today was different. The simulators had tested her skill, but now she would experience the real thing: flight alongside active pilots in the world's most advanced fighter jets. Her heart pounded as she approached the cockpit, a metallic throne of dials, levers, and screens. The aircraft towered over her like a living creature, its surface smooth and unforgiving. She climbed inside, adjusting her seat and helmet, her fingers brushing the controls with reverence. Around her, other pilots were preparing, exchanging nods and last-minute checks. She could feel the tension radiating from them. Experienced combat pilots, each with thousands of flight hours in high-performance jets. And here she was, a civilian about to fly among them. The squadron leader's voice cut through the headset. "Ghost Rider, we're about to take off. Follow formation, maintain altitude, and stay sharp. This is no longer a simulation. Every move counts." Exhaled, steadying herself. The engines roared to life beneath her, vibrating through her entire body. She felt the sudden pressure in her chest as the jet surged forward. Within seconds, she was airborne, the runway shrinking below as the F-22 responded to her every command. The view was breathtaking. Clouds rolled past in ribbons of white, the sun glinting off the aluminum wings, and the horizon stretched endlessly. At first, the flight was routine. Formation flying, basic maneuvers, and communication drills. Found herself adjusting quickly, her instincts from the simulator kicking in. Her fingers moved across controls almost automatically, responding to altitude, airspeed, and the subtle movements of the surrounding jets. She felt a growing confidence. This was no longer an experiment, no longer a test. She was part of the team. But the calm didn't last long. A sudden alert on the radar snapped the squadron into high alert mode. Simulated hostile aircraft had appeared on an approach vector that required immediate evasive action. The squadron leader barked commands, banking sharply, calling out maneuvers over the radio. Stomach dropped as the G-forces pressed her into the seat, her muscles straining to maintain control. Every second counted. Hesitation would be fatal. Her mind snapped into focus. She remembered every simulation drill, every calculation, every evasive tactic she had practiced. She banked hard, executing a maneuver that took her outside the expected flight path, twisting her jet through with precise timing. The enemy aircraft, programmed to anticipate predictable patterns, overshot her position. A voice crackled over the comms. "Ghost Rider, where did you come from?" It was disbelief and admiration, mingled with a trace of envy. The squadron leader's voice followed, clipped and urgent. "Maintain formation. Ghost Rider, lead the intercept." Caught? Lead the intercept. This was no longer about following orders or proving herself. This was about responsibility, quick thinking, and trust from pilots who had initially doubted her. She adjusted her trajectory, calling out instructions, coordinating movements with precision. Enemy aircraft darted, twisted, and accelerated aggressively, but she anticipated each maneuver, countering with swift, calculated moves that kept her formation safe and positioned for a simulated strike. For several tense minutes, the sky became a battlefield of speed, altitude, and spatial awareness. Fingers flew across the controls, her senses stretched to the limit. She could feel the vibration of the engines, the subtle shifts of air pressure, the slightest deviations in her instruments. Sweat dripped down her back, but she ignored it, focusing entirely on the choreography of jets, clouds, and enemy positions. At one point, an enemy jet closed in from above, banking aggressively for a simulated attack run. Other pilots reacted with textbook evasive maneuvers but anticipated a less obvious path. She twisted her jet into a sharp loop, dodging the attack with precision that left the veteran pilots momentarily stunned. Over the comms, laughter turned to astonishment. "Ghost Rider, you're unreal," muttered one, barely able to disguise awe. As the engagement concluded, the squadron leveled off, breathing heavily but exhilarated. The instructors on the ground ran diagnostics, reviewing performance and timing, but their eyes betrayed admiration. Two felt a surge of pride mixed with exhaustion. She had not only survived her first real F-22 flight, she had thrived, commanding respect and earning trust from the pilots she had once feared would dismiss her. After landing, climbed out of the cockpit, knees weak but exhilarated. The sun had climbed higher, casting long shadows across the tarmac. Pilots approached, offering nods, handshakes, and rare words of praise. "You handled that beautifully," said one. Another added, "Ghost Rider isn't just a name anymore, you earned it today." Smiled, letting the words sink in. Her ordinary life, the commercial flights, the layovers, the predictable routine, was no longer sufficient. She had glimpsed something beyond, a realm of speed, skill, and risk that demanded her very best. And for the first time, she realized that this was just the beginning. Back in the briefing room, the squadron leader debriefed them all. He replayed the flight, showing her maneuvers, pointing out both errors and brilliant anticipations. Listened intently, absorbing every detail, committing each lesson to memory. She knew this was only the start. The real challenge lay ahead, pushing beyond simulations into fully operational scenarios, testing not only her skill but her courage. That night, as she lay in her hotel room, stared out the window at the vast Chicago skyline, lights twinkling like stars. The day's flight replayed endlessly in her mind. The adrenaline, the precision, the thrill of outmaneuvering pilots who had years of combat experience. She felt a strange mixture of exhaustion and exhilaration, a hunger that could not be sated by ordinary skis. "Ghost Rider," she whispered softly, letting the name roll over her tongue. It was no longer just a call sign, it was a promise. A promise that she would rise to meet every challenge, push every boundary, and prove that ordinary pilots could achieve extraordinary feats. The sky was no longer a limit. It was a battlefield, a canvas, and a stage for her talents. And somewhere in the vast expanse of airspace above, felt a thrill that no commercial flight had ever offered, the intoxicating mix of danger, mastery, and freedom. She knew, without a doubt, that her life was about to change forever. The day began before dawn, the tarmac shrouded in a pale mist, engines humming as if sensing the anticipation of the pilots. Tightened her flight suit and stepped toward her F-22, her boots clicking against the concrete. Today wasn't just another flight or even a simulation. It was a high-stakes joint exercise designed to push pilots to the edge. Veteran F-22 pilots eyed her with cautious curiosity. Some were still skeptical, recalling her civilian background. But she no longer felt doubt. Ghost Rider was no longer a name whispered in surprise. She was ready to earn the full weight of it. Strapped into the cockpit, ran through pre-flight checks. Her fingers moved with practiced precision, flipping switches, checking gauges, and synchronizing communications. Around her, the other pilots did the same, each movement smooth, confident, almost ritualistic. The engines roared to life, the vibration shaking through her core, and the hum of power filled the cockpit. She felt her pulse quicken. This was the moment where skill and instinct collided, where preparation met pure adrenaline. The squadron leader's voice broke the tension. "Ghost Rider, you're leading today's intercept. Take point and coordinate maneuvers. All others follow your guidance. Eyes open, instincts sharp. This is no simulation. This is tactical exercise, and failure is not an option." His heart pounded, but she inhaled deeply, centering herself. Lead the intercept. This was the ultimate test of everything she had learned in simulators, her commercial experience, and her instincts. As the jets lifted off, the world blurred beneath them. Clouds streaked past, the sun catching on the sleek fuselages, and the hum of supersonic engines filled her senses. Almost immediately, the exercise escalated. Simulated enemy aircraft appeared on radar, approaching aggressively from multiple vectors. Veteran pilots responded instantly, performing maneuvers that had become second nature. His eyes scanned the instruments, her mind calculating trajectories, speeds, and altitudes. Then instinct took over. She called out precise instructions over the comms, coordinating her squadron to intercept, evade, and position strategically. The engagement intensified. Enemy aircraft weaved in complex patterns, banking sharply and diving with deadly precision. Responded instinctively, twisting her jet through impossible angles, each movement a combination of calculation and gut instinct. Her squadron followed, some in awe of her quick decisions, others in disbelief that a civilian could anticipate maneuvers so effectively. Over the comms, one pilot chuckled nervously. "Ghost Rider, you're making this look easy." Ignored the commentary, her mind focused entirely on the sky, the simulated threats, and the positioning of her squadron. One enemy jet attempted a surprise flank from above, while the others reacted predictably, anticipated the maneuver, countering with a sharp roll and dive that placed her directly in the optimal intercept position. Over comms, the squadron leader's voice came through, tinged with respect. "Exceptional awareness, Ghost Rider. Maintain pressure." For the next 20 minutes, the sky became a complex chessboard of altitude, speed, and timing. Coordinated her squadron, called out evasive maneuvers, and executed daring strategies to neutralize the simulated enemy threat. Every decision had consequences. One miscalculation could leave her formation vulnerable. But she moved with confidence and precision, blending her commercial discipline with combat instinct. Each successful maneuver reinforced her growing legend among the pilots. At one point, a virtual adversary attempted an aggressive dive from the horizon, banking sharply to evade interception. Anticipated the path, rolling her jet with flawless timing. She positioned her squadron perfectly, leaving the enemy with no escape. The comms erupted in admiration. "That's Ghost Rider," one veteran shouted. "Unbelievable precision," another added. "We've got to debrief that. She's rewriting tactics." When the exercise finally ended, the jets leveled off and began descent. Pilots' faces were flushed, muscles tense from the G-forces, yet there was a palpable shift in the room. Respect had replaced doubt, had not only led the intercept successfully but had also demonstrated a level of foresight, calm, and precision that rivaled the most seasoned F-22 pilots. She felt a surge of pride mixed with exhaustion, a rare combination that left her exhilarated. Back on the ground, the squadron gathered for a debriefing. Instructors replayed the engagement, highlighting key moments where instincts and decisions had prevented the simulated enemy from gaining any advantage. "Most pilots overcomplicate these maneuvers," the squadron leader said. "Ghost Rider executed flawlessly, anticipating patterns and responding with creativity and precision. Exceptional. The veterans who had doubted her now approached, offering nods, handshakes, and quiet words of praise. "You earned every bit of that call sign," one said. Another added, "I didn't think a civilian could handle this, but you've proven me wrong." Smiled, a deep sense of accomplishment filling her. She had come a long way from the commercial cockpit, where the greatest challenge had been maintaining altitude and schedule. Here, she had truly proven herself. Later, as she walked back to her temporary quarters, reflected on the day. The fear and skepticism she had felt upon entering the F-22 world had been replaced by exhilaration and confidence. Ghost Rider wasn't just a nickname anymore. It was a symbol of skill, adaptability, and courage. She had bridged the gap between ordinary aviation and elite fighter operations, showing that with instinct, discipline, and determination, boundaries could be challenged. That evening, alone in her room, replayed the day in her mind. Every maneuver, every calculated risk, every split-second decision flashed through her memory. She wrote notes, sketches, and reflections in her flight journal, knowing that this was only the beginning. She had proven herself, yes, but there were greater heights to reach, more challenges to face, and a world beyond ordinary skis waiting to be conquered. Closed her notebook and stared out the window at the horizon. The city lights twinkled like distant stars, but her eyes were on the sky above. The thrill of flight, of mastery, of commanding machines that could defy limits, called to her. She had earned respect, proven skill, and begun a transformation that few could imagine. Ghost Rider was real, and the sky was hers to conquer. The next morning awoke to an unusual sense of calm. For the first time in weeks, she wasn't consumed with adrenaline, simulations, or anticipation. Instead, her mind buzzed with reflections on yesterday's high-stakes exercise. She had led the intercept flawlessly, earning respect and acknowledgement from pilots who had once doubted her abilities. Ghost Rider was no longer just a nickname. It was a mantle she had earned. Her phone buzzed with notifications. Social media accounts dedicated to military aviation had picked up rumors of a civilian outmaneuvering F-22 pilots in simulations. Articles appeared online speculating, "Who is Ghost Rider? The civilian pilot making fighter pilots look ordinary." Scrolled cautiously, absorbing the attention. She felt a strange mix of pride, disbelief, and discomfort. The recognition was gratifying, but the exposure carried risk. Military operations demanded secrecy, discipline, and respect for boundaries she was only beginning to understand. A knock on the door interrupted her thoughts. It was the squadron leader, informal but commanding, holding a folder. "Morning, Ghost Rider. The program office wants to meet you. Your performance is exceptional. They're considering a rare position, a contract role bridging civilian expertise with elite operations." Felt a jolt of excitement and fear. A contract role meant more responsibility, longer hours, and potentially classified missions. It would also mean stepping fully into a world she had only tested in simulations. The safe, predictable life of airline flights, layovers, and regulated schedules seemed distant now, almost stifling. And yet, the thrill of challenge called to her stronger than ever. During the meeting, officers outlined the details. She would work alongside F-22 squadrons, participate in live tactical exercises, and assist in refining training protocols for both civilian and military pilots. Confidentiality agreements, security clearances, and specialized training were mandatory. The role promised risk, exposure, and relentless demand, but also the chance to operate at the cutting edge of aviation. Listened intently, weighing every aspect. The logical part of her mind, the commercial pilot, the disciplined planner, warned of the dangers, the lifestyle change, the uncertainty. But instinctively she felt drawn to the offer. This was more than just skill testing. It was purpose, adrenaline, and mastery combined. She had proven herself in simulation and live exercises. Now she could truly belong in a realm where skill and instinct mattered above rank or history. Outside the briefing room, she met the veteran pilots she had flown with. Some nodded in acknowledgement, others offered subtle smiles of approval. Their initial skepticism had shifted to respect, even camaraderie. "You're not just Ghost Rider," one said quietly. "You're an example, proof that discipline, calm, and instinct can compete with years of combat experience." Felt a swell of pride but also a weight of responsibility. Recognition brought visibility, and visibility brought scrutiny. The media, online forums, and aviation enthusiasts were already speculating about her identity. If her story spread too widely, it could compromise operational security, strain relationships with the military, and potentially jeopardize her safety. The thrill of achievement came paired with new stakes. That evening walked alone along the edge of the airfield. The sunset stretched across the horizon, painting the sky in streaks of orange and gold. She reflected on her journey from a commercial pilot navigating predictable skies to Ghost Rider, a civilian earning respect among elite fighter pilots. The transition had been exhilarating but not without inner conflict. She had crossed a threshold. Her old life seemed distant, almost unreal. Yet the question remained: how far was she willing to go? Her thoughts turned to her airline colleagues, the routines she had loved, the friendships she had nurtured. Accepting this role would mean leaving that world behind. She would be stepping into uncertainty, danger, and the unknown. Could she reconcile her need for stability with the exhilaration of elite flight? Could she balance fame, secrecy, and the relentless demands of the program? The path ahead promised glory but demanded sacrifice. Phone buzzed again, an encrypted message from the recruiter. "Program office, final decision tomorrow. Be ready for next step." She stared at it for a long moment. Her chest tightened with anticipation. This wasn't just about skill anymore. It was about choice, commitment, identity. The life she knew and the life she dreamed of were diverging, and she would have to step decisively onto one path. She returned to her hotel room, sitting at the window and writing in her journal. Every line reflected her conflict, excitement and fear, pride and uncertainty. She noted her achievements, the moments of instinct-driven brilliance and the respect she had earned. Yet she also recorded her doubts, the risks, and the potential losses. Ghost Rider was no longer just a persona in the sky. It was a challenge she had to live with, to embody, and to control. By nightfall, a sense of clarity began to emerge. She realized that fear was natural, but stagnation was worse. The predictable, ordinary life she had known could no longer contain her ambition or her talent. Recognition from the squadron and media attention, while intimidating, was validation of her potential. She had earned the right to step fully into this world. The question was not whether she could succeed, it was whether she was ready to commit fully. Lay back on the bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying simulations and flights in her mind. Every maneuver, every split-second decision, every earned nod of respect played like a film. She thought of the first time she had heard Ghost Rider over the comms, of the exhilaration she had felt in the simulator, and the pride she had earned in live flight. Recognition was no longer external, it was internal. She had become the pilot she had always dreamed of being. By the time sleep claimed her, the choice had crystallized. She would accept the program's offer, step fully into the role of Ghost Rider, and embrace the challenges, risks, and exhilaration that came with it. Her ordinary life as a commercial pilot was ending. Ahead lay mastery, danger, and the limitless skis she had longed for. The world was about to see what Ghost Rider could do, not as a legend whispered in comms, but as a reality soaring at impossible speed. Closed her eyes, her heart steady with resolve. Tomorrow would mark the beginning of her new life, one where skill, instinct, and courage defined her, and where Ghost Rider would rise fully into the skis. The early morning air at the base was crisp, the horizon painted with streaks of gold and violet as the sun began its climb. Stood at the edge of the tarmac, her flight suit snug and helmet under her arm. Today was the day. The program office had finalized her offer, and the choice she had pondered for weeks had been made official. She would step fully into the role of Ghost Rider, a civilian bridging elite fighter operations. The thrill coursed through her veins, mingled with the weight of responsibility she now carried. Her colleagues, veteran F-22 pilots who had once doubted her, gathered nearby, exchanging quiet nods and small smiles of respect. They had watched her grow from an uncertain civilian into a capable, instinct-driven leader in the skis. Some were still reserved, wary of how a civilian might adapt to the extreme demands of operational flight. But the skepticism had softened. Their respect was evident in every gesture and glance. Approached the squadron leader, who handed her a folder containing official mission protocols, flight schedules, and training requirements. "You understand what this entails, Ghost Rider?" he asked. His voice was steady, serious, but carried a hint of encouragement. "I do," she said firmly. Her voice carried confidence, though inside her heart raced. She understood the magnitude of her decision. Accepting the position meant leaving behind the predictable life she had known. Airlines, layovers, familiar routines gone. In their place lay high-speed intercepts, tactical exercises, and the constant risk inherent in flying advanced fighter aircraft. The first task of the day was a full operational simulation with live, high-performance maneuvers. Climbed into her F-22, adjusted her seat and helmet, and ran through the pre-flight checklist with methodical precision. She could feel the familiar vibration of engines beneath her, the subtle hum of electronics that made the cockpit feel alive. Outside, the other jets roared in readiness, each pilot focused, professional, and aware of the stakes. The squadron leader's voice came over the comms. "Ghost Rider, you're leading the intercept today. Enemy targets are approaching fast. Coordinate your squadron and execute the maneuvers with precision. This is your call." His pulse quickened, but her hands were steady. "Lead the intercept." The words echoed in her mind, a mantra she had repeated countless times during simulations. This was the real thing, no room for error, no safety net. She guided her jet onto takeoff, the ground falling away beneath her as the aircraft lifted gracefully into the sky. The virtual horizon transformed into a battlefield almost immediately. Enemy aircraft appeared on radar, moving unpredictably, testing both her reflexes and strategic thinking. Responded with instinct and training, coordinating the squadron with clear, concise commands. Each maneuver required split-second decisions, banking, rolling, accelerating, decelerating, all while maintaining formation and anticipating the enemy's next move. For nearly 30 minutes, the sky became a blur of speed, clouds, and digital adversaries. His heart raced as she executed daring maneuvers, countering enemy tactics that even the veteran pilots struggled to anticipate. Her instincts guided her, honed by months of simulations and experience, blending commercial precision with combat awareness. Over the comms, one pilot muttered in awe, "I didn't think she'd do that. Ghost Rider, she's something else." The exercise ended with a successful intercept, her squadron intact and the simulated threat neutralized. The landing back at the base was smooth, executed flawlessly, and its adrenaline slowly gave way to satisfaction. Veteran pilots approached, offering handshakes, words of praise, and subtle acknowledgments of respect. She had proven herself not just capable, but exceptional. Later in the briefing room, the program director outlined the next phase of her training: live operations, classified missions, and advanced aerial combat exercises. Every detail emphasized responsibility, discipline, and risk. Listened intently, absorbing the scope of what she had chosen. The decision to step fully into this world was not about glory alone. It was about mastering skill, embracing danger, and earning the trust of those around her. After the briefing, walked alone on the tarmac, reflecting on her journey. She remembered the first time she had heard Ghost Rider over the comms, her heart racing with curiosity and excitement. She thought of the simulations, the training, the skeptics, and the first real flight. Every moment had led her to this choice: to embrace uncertainty, to seek mastery, and to redefine her limits. Her phone buzzed with a single message from a friend back in her commercial life. "Are you sure about this?" smiled softly. She knew the risks, the sacrifices, and the unknowns. She also knew that stagnation had never been an option. Fear existed, yes, but so did potential, growth, and the thrill of mastering the skis. By the evening, had finalized her commitment. She would continue with the program, earn full clearance, and participate in missions that few civilians could ever experience. Ghost Rider was no longer a nickname. It was a declaration of purpose, a symbol of transformation. She had chosen to step fully into this new life, leaving behind ordinary skis for extraordinary challenges. The following days blurred into rigorous training. Schedule was relentless. High-G maneuvers, tactical intercepts, advanced simulation drills, and coordination with veteran pilots who now treated her as a peer rather than an outsider. Every flight tested her limits, but every success reinforced her confidence. She was learning faster than anyone had expected, adapting instincts and mastering skills that many seasoned pilots found daunting. Through it all, Ghost Rider became more than a persona, it became a philosophy. Understood the balance of caution and audacity, strategy and intuition, discipline and instinct. Her identity as a commercial pilot faded into the background, replaced by a focused, fearless presence in the sky. She was no longer ordinary, she was exceptional. By the end of the week, stood on the tarmac once more, watching the sun dip below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of fire and gold. She felt the weight of her choice settle comfortably on her shoulders. The risks, the sacrifices, and the unknowns were real, but so was her potential, her skill, and her purpose. Ghost Rider was ready. The sky was no longer a limit. It was a canvas, a battlefield, and a stage for mastery. Once an ordinary commercial pilot had made her choice. She had embraced the challenge, the danger, and the unknown. She had stepped fully into the world of elite fighter operations. And in doing so, she had become something more, someone capable of shaping her destiny at supersonic speed, earning respect, and redefining what it meant to be a pilot. The sky over the Midwest stretched endlessly, a canvas of deep blue streaked with clouds and sunlight reflecting off the polished wings of F-22s in formation. Climbed into her jet, the familiar hum of the engines vibrating beneath her, a pulse in sync with her own heartbeat. Today marked the culmination of everything she had worked for, months of rigorous training, simulations, and live intercepts. Ghost Rider was no longer a nickname. It was a symbol of mastery, courage, and the bridge between civilian skill and elite combat aviation. As the squadron took off, the world below shrank into a patchwork of fields and rivers. Formation flying was flawless. Movements were precise, instinctive, and deliberate. The veteran pilots around her moved with seamless coordination, each relying on her guidance, each trusting her judgment. She had earned their respect, and it was clear in every nod, every glance, every split-second response to her calls. The mission ahead was complex. Intercept a series of fast-moving, unpredictable drones simulating hostile aircraft, each programmed to test the limits of reaction, coordination, and tactical ingenuity. This exercise was the most advanced she had ever faced. Failure was not an option. It wasn't just about her performance. It was about proving that a civilian pilot could stand shoulder to shoulder with the elite. The engagement began. Drones streaked toward the squadron at impossible speeds, diving, twisting, and banking in unpredictable patterns. Responded instantly, calling out maneuvers, adjusting her own trajectory, and positioning the squadron for optimal engagement. The G-forces pressed her into the seat, but she pushed through, relying on instinct honed over countless flights. She could feel every movement, anticipate every turn, and react with precision that blurred the line between human and machine. Minutes stretched into an intense blur of maneuvers. Enemy drones darted aggressively, attempting flanks, baiting mistakes, and testing every instinct had developed. She countered each tactic, her squadron following seamlessly. Over the comms, a veteran pilot's voice cracked in awe. "Ghost Rider, she's rewriting the playbook." His mind was razor-sharp, every decision a balance of speed, intuition, and calculated risk. She executed maneuvers that were unconventional yet effective, weaving through clouds and air currents with an elegance and precision that left even seasoned pilots astonished. The drones, programmed for unpredictability, were systematically neutralized. One by one, they were intercepted, their simulated attacks thwarted by her foresight and leadership. As the final drone was downed, The squadron leveled off, engines humming in harmony. Victory was palpable, but more than that, it was a validation. Ghost Rider had not just survived. She had excelled, led, and demonstrated a level of skill that few could match. The pilots around her who had once doubted her now viewed her as a peer, a leader, and a symbol of what could be achieved with discipline, instinct, and courage. After landing, the debriefing was thorough. Instructors and senior officers replayed every maneuver, noting her tactical decisions, split-second reactions, and command over the squadron. "Exceptional," the program director said. "Ms. has demonstrated not only the technical skill required for elite fighter operations, but also the leadership, composure, and intuition that are the hallmark of an exceptional pilot. Ghost Rider is no longer just a call sign. It is a standard of excellence." Listened quietly, absorbing the words without ego. Pride mingled with humility. She had come a long way from her commercial flights, yet the journey was ongoing. The skis had no limits, no boundaries, only challenges to meet and mastery to achieve. Ghost Rider had become more than her identity, it had become a legacy. In the days that followed, story began to ripple outward. Within the program, she became a benchmark for training and skill development, her methods studied and incorporated into future exercises. Her adaptability, instinct, and calm under pressure were analyzed, shared, and celebrated. Outside the military, whispers of Ghost Rider began circulating among aviation enthusiasts, pilots, and even media, though carefully controlled to maintain operational security. She became a quiet legend, a civilian who had bridged two worlds with excellence. Despite the recognition, remained grounded. Every flight, every maneuver, every mission was approached with focus and discipline. The thrill of the sky, the mastery of flight, and the responsibility of leadership never lost their edge. Ghost Rider was not a title to flaunt. It was a duty to uphold, a challenge to meet, and a reminder of the boundaries she had crossed and the limits she had redefined. Months later, she stood on the edge of the tarmac, watching a formation of F-22s streak into the horizon. The sun was low, painting the clouds in fire and gold. Veteran pilots approached, offering nods, subtle smiles, and quiet congratulations. "You've changed the game, Ghost Rider," one said. "Not just for us, but for what's possible." Smiled, the wind tugging at her flight suit. She felt a deep sense of satisfaction, not from fame, not from recognition, but from knowing she had seized opportunity, faced fear, and mastered her craft. Ghost Rider was her own creation, a testament to skill, courage, and relentless pursuit of excellence. She had proven that boundaries existed only to be challenged. As night fell, she looked up at the stars, the vastness of the sky reflecting the vastness of potential she had unlocked. The ordinary pilot she had once been seemed a distant memory, replaced by someone capable of defying expectation, mastering extreme challenges, and inspiring others to rise beyond limits. In her journal, she wrote the final words of her first chapter as Ghost Rider. "The sky has no limits, only the courage to rise, the skill to navigate, and the heart to persevere. I am Ghost Rider, and this is only the beginning." Had transformed from a commercial pilot into a living legend in her own right. She had earned respect, mastered fear, and created a legacy that would inspire pilots for generations. The call sign Ghost Rider was no longer whispered with surprise, it was spoken with reverence. The skis belonged to those who dared to rise and had claimed them as her own. And somewhere high above, where the clouds stretched endlessly, the roar of her F-22 echoed, a reminder that ordinary limits were meant to be shattered, and that Ghost Rider would always soar.